A lot of people say that fall is the best time to spray out in the pasture, and that's partially right. I like fall, Darren, except for if frost comes too early. Here's my point. I want you to spray at least a little bit before your first hard-killing frost. That's where you get the very best performance on any of those weeds out in your pasture.
Well, early fall is the best time to spray. Yes, I agree with Brian. Late fall, that kind of limits your options and limits really the productivity of that spray. So when we look at early fall, plants are really growing fast. They're trying to bring in water and nutrients down into that root system so they can survive through the winter. We're talking about biennial plants and perennial plants, which are really the toughest weeds to control out in pastures. So here's your shot to put a herbicide on that can potentially move with that water and nutrient transport down into the roots and kill that plant completely.
Our number one suggestion for perennials, biennials, if you just say, look, I got a whole bunch of different weeds out there, is going to be Tordon. Tordon's a great product, but the problem with it is it lasts a long time in the soil, so you don't want to use this on a pasture that might go into crops in the next few years. There's also Milestone that's excellent on thistles. There's Chaparral that's good on woody species. There's Remedy that's not a restricted use product that is good on woody species but doesn't have the longevity that the Tordon does. So there are a lot of different options out there, but to take that a step above and beyond, I think not only about how are we going to kill the weeds with these herbicides, but how are we just going to have more grass out there. So one thing I've been talking to farmers about is, there are plant growth hormones that naturally exist in plants. If you put more of the plant growth hormone on, especially in colder temperatures, you can get more grass, and that's what you're after. How about if you could add a couple weeks in the fall to your grazing? How about if you could add a couple weeks in the spring to your grazing? Well, having great weed control really helps, but also something like Rise Up Smart Grass could make a big difference.
All right, you're stealing my thunder here, because I think too many of us look at our lawns and say, oh, I don't want to get carried away on fertility there. I don't want to have to mow every other day all through the fall. Hey, pastures are totally different. We want that grass to grow like crazy. We want to have plenty of food out there for our livestock. And there's two things going on here. One, university and private research has shown that for every pound of weed growth you have in your pastures, it takes away 2 pounds or maybe even more of grass growth. So if you want more food for your cattle, if you want to be able to run more head of cattle per acre on your pasture, here's your shot. Control the weeds. Number two, to hold those weeds down, just like in our row crop fields, we want to have good crop canopy to choke out those weeds. And if we can get excellent grass growth, both with a nice fertility program and then using plant growth hormones that are natural, the plants would naturally produce these. It's just that production slows down when it gets cooler. We can add something like Rise Up Smart Grass and really extend our grazing window and get better growth, taller grass, and more weed control for hardly anything. It's a really good strategy that's been proven to work both with organic fed cattle and regular cattle as well.
Let me give you 2 other quick tips. One is soil test. Treat it just like a field. Go grid sample or zone sample, and I know your neighbors might think you're crazy by being out soil sampling your pasture, but do it. It's going to make you all kinds of money, because now you know where to best invest your fertilizer dollars in your pasture ground. Then the next thing is you want to focus on rotational grazing each year when you've got your cattle out there. So you do those couple of things. You follow with good weed control, using some Rise Up Smart Grass or some plant growth hormone, and you can have the best pastures you've ever had in your life. Well, once again, pasture management is incredibly important, especially in today's times. We want to get the most grass possible. We want you to get the most grass possible. So just follow some of these tips, and this next year should be your best year ever.
Well, it'll certainly be your best year ever if you can wipe out weeds for good, and especially if you got a weed like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?